Today's reading is a poem by Shel Silverstein titled, "What If?" Last night, while I lay thinking here, some what ifs crawled inside my ear and pranced and partied all night long and sang their same old what if song. What if I'm dumb in school? What if they've closed the swimming pool? What if I get beat up? What if there's poison in my cup? What if I start to cry? What if I get sick and die? What if I flunk that test? What if green hair grows on my chest? What if nobody likes me? What if a bolt of lightning strikes me? What if I don't grow taller? What if my head starts getting smaller? What if the fish won't bite? What if the wind tears up my kite? What if they start a war? What if my parents get divorced? What if the bus is late? What if my teeth don't grow in straight? What if I tear my pants? What if I never learn to dance? Everything seems well, and then the nighttime what ifs strike again. The world has gotten weirder. Weirder. And I don't mean weirder like back when I was a kid, before there were computers, I had to walk uphill both ways to school, and there was snow up to the second story of my house. I mean objectively weirder. We live in a divided world. We live between us. Oh, no, us. I got that backwards. It is pretty weird. Us and them. And I'm not saying who us and them are. It's probably different for each of us. But when we turn on the news, this us and them can become readily apparent. I mean objectively weirder in the sense that climate change, global warming, if you will, presents us with an existential crisis that perhaps we've never faced before. Hence, weekly, we have a reflection on climate change and heat pumps. I need to replace my AC, so I might go heat pump route. Totally. But it's true that we've also faced existential crises before. Threats of war between two global superpowers, another us versus them. There have been global wars spanning multiple continents, and there is currently hostile posturing among the world's larger military powers. Throughout human history, we have faced crisis after crisis, and each always seems more dire than the last. Our most recent existential crisis, the pandemic, seemed in February, March, and April of 2020 like it might be the end of the world. And in some ways, it was. What an awful experience. But it was not a unique experience or unique event in the human experience. Duke University's Global Health Institute estimates that there's about a 2% chance every year of a pandemic like that occurring. So it's not really that unusual in the larger scheme of things. But we, human beings, have a skill that makes us somewhat unique. To quote SpongeBob SquarePants, that skill is, James, do you remember what it is, the skill that SpongeBob teaches us?
Imagination and happiness?
Well, one of the two, but both. Imagination. SpongeBob teaches us that. One of the episodes, the idiot box. It's about a box. I'm not going to get into it. That is what the episode's called. It actually is. SpongeBob orders a TV. It comes in a big box. He throws the TV in the trash and gets in the box, and then he uses his Imagination.
And then Squidward uses a TV.
And Squidward uses the TV. Yes. Next week, we're just going to play a video on the TV and he'll narrate it.
No, Squidward orders a TV, but then
No, they.
Rob and Patrick use the box for imagination.
Okay.
That's Squidward.
Okay. We now have that explained. Perfect. During our reading today, you heard Shel Silverstein's poem, What If? Last night while I lay thinking here, some what ifs crawled inside my ear. And then goes through a bunch of different things that we can think about in our heads and imagine, and the worst case scenarios. And then when we finally let them go, everything seems well, and then the nighttime what ifs strike again. It could be any time, day or night, and our imagination runs away with us, from us. A few months ago, I may have read you a story about a monster in an attic. Does anyone remember it? I'm warning you, because if you don't remember it, I'm going to retell it.
I remember it. It was to scare me.
Okay, yeah? Well, you have apparently heard this story before, so hopefully you'll be okay this time. Okay, we're going to hear it again. There was no time for all ages today, so we're going to just insert it here. The first time anyone heard about the creature in the barn attic was after one of the children went up there to look for an old book being stored in a box, as attics are often used for this sort of thing. Everything was dark, but between the shadows, the boy could clearly see two eyes watching him intently from above with a horrific expression on its face. They were big eyes and about an arm's width apart, giving some idea of the size of the terrible being's head. The boy yelled with every bit of air in his lungs, ran out and locked the door, leaving the monster in the barn, growling to itself and beating on the door as if it wanted to escape and terrorize the village. For the next 2 days, the people in that village were living in terror. The growls from the barn and the beating on the barn door continued, and news of the creature's cruel nature spread all across the land. The terrifying behavior only got worse, but no one was brave enough to go into that barn and confront the beast. Before long, a Norwegian fisherman who barely spoke their language walked into the village. Some days earlier, his ship had sunk. And this fellow, this Norwegian fisherman, seemed like a formidable old sea dog, a hard character indeed. Some men in the village asked him to help them confront the awful creature. The Norwegian did not hesitate to help in return for a little money. But when he approached the barn and heard the growls of the monster, his expression changed, and he went back to the villagers to ask for a lot more money. In fact, he asked for so much money that everyone in the village gave down to their last cent. He also asked for a large stick, a big net, and a horse and a cart. If and when he was to triumph against the beach, he wanted to take it away as a trophy. All the village folk gathered around and watched as the Norwegian opened the barn door and went inside. The villagers locked the door behind him for safety and listened to the deep shuddering growls and sounds of the fishermen yelling. After the fishermen had been inside for a short while, all of the noises stopped. And never again would the villagers see the Norwegian or hear the sounds of the beast. Neither did anyone ever dare go into the barn again. Do you want to know what happened behind the door? You do? Okay. Well, when the Norwegian fisherman opened the door, he could see the eye of Olaf, his enormous and fierce helmsman from the fishing boat that had sunk, and whose gruff voice he had recognized earlier when the villagers had taken him to the barn and he heard all the growling. That was Olaf. The eye was also reflected in a mirror being stored about a meter or so over to the side of where Olaf was among all the boxes, giving the impression of two eyes belonging to the same head. Olaf's other eye had been covered by a patch for years after a fishing accident in his youth. Both men began yelling loudly in their own language, both surprised by the sight of each other. The fisherman told his imprisoned friend that the nervous villagers had given him so much money that they would be able to return home and buy another ship to carry on fishing. Together, they managed to find a way to escape out the back of the barn, get to the cart, and disappear forever. And so it was that fear and imagination impoverished that whole village and enabled the Norwegian fishermen to buy another boat and resume fishing. That story illustrates the same idea as the poem. What if? The villagers' imaginations got away from them, and they let fear of the unknown rule and ruin their lives. Several years ago, while I was on a Zoom call with my seminary cohort, and this was during the middle time of the pandemic when we were all used to using Zoom and all that kind of stuff, and we just didn't go to school. We went on Zoom instead. We were treated to a moment of absurdity that took us out of a deep discussion about school and life and the future and brought us back to the real world. The call, being on Zoom, was broadcasting video, just like the video of this service going out on Zoom. During this deep, deep discussion, as seminarians are wont to engage in, I think I'm losing my chalice extinguishers, but that's okay. So we were having a deep, deep discussion, and who should walk into the room behind me, of course visible on camera, since he was behind my computer, but my son James. I am not one to assign a profound nature to 6-year-olds, having been a preschool teacher and having a total of 3 of my own kids, but sometimes James surprises me with his observations. Members of the seminary cohort had often seen James during Zoom classes at Star King for School for the Ministry, the one over in Berkeley, you probably all know about. They had seen him over the years in almost all of my classes. He would just pop in. They had seen him up at Camp de Benneville Pines in the mountains above Redlands in Southern California. That's the UU camp down there. He popped in on our cohort meetings just to say hi and to see everyone that he knew and show them a stuffed animal or a Lego he had built and say hello. The cohort had even shared birthday cake with him in person during May of 2020 during the pandemic. But we sat 10 feet apart because everybody was so scared of catching COVID. And into this heavy discussion on this particular day walks James. Our discussion stopped as James walked up to the desk, standing beside me, and he turned his gaze back and forth because I'm there in person. He can see me on the Zoom screen. And he said, well, no, I said to him first. I said, yes. I was a little frustrated because we were in the middle of this discussion and he's standing there, he's like, I want to talk. Squidward has 6 legs, he says, without skipping a beat. Really? I asked. Yes. And then he turned and ran out of the room. And we all burst out laughing. Because we all knew about SpongeBob and that whole cartoon and the idea that he would come in and say that and then just run away. It was just silliness. And when we're having this heavy conversation, a nice kind of break. For those of you who might not be watchers of SpongeBob SquarePants, the cartoon, Squidward is one of the main characters in the show, the perpetual antagonist to Squidward's perpetually childlike protagonist. The show itself is constantly engaged in an absurdist comedy drama aesthetic in which nothing in particular ever makes sense. I mean, SpongeBob lives in a pineapple under the sea, or is it an aquarium? And he works at a restaurant owned by a crab that sells Krabby Patties. Albert Camus, the French philosopher noted for his work in the areas of existentialism and absurdism, gives us three choices in the face of a world that defies understanding. First, we can give up, like physically, literally give up. Second, we can philosophically give up. We can stop any search for meaning in what is essentially a meaningless world. No matter how much we ask the universe to speak to us, it doesn't really ever answer. Or we have a third option. We can embrace the absurdity of our existence. We can lean into the vastness of a universe that doesn't always answer back. We can make the search for meaning the purpose, but we can't give up on that search, because then we fall back into nihilism and philosophically giving up. But I'm not here to bore you with either a lecture on absurdism or to explain to you how the SpongeBob cartoon revels in its absurdity. But living as we do in a time so weird, so divided, just out of a global pandemic, in which the main characters we see on television every day, in our news feeds, on our phones, whose words are quoted and read in the news reports every day, who we did or didn't vote for, are often making absurd statements, maybe outright lying to us. Perhaps a young child telling us that Squidward has 6 legs is just the thing we need. You see, Squidward in the SpongeBob canon is not a squid. He is, in fact, an octopus. This is shown multiple times throughout the episodes and seasons. However, Squidward's rival in life is named Squilliam Fancyson, another squid name. And yet both Squidward and Squilliam are giant Pacific octopi, and they both have 6 legs. My son used to play a game. If he sees a roll of wrapping paper, he grabs it. It doesn't matter what kind it is. Birthday wrapping paper, check. Christmas wrapping paper, check. Hanukkah wrapping paper, check. Nondescript wrapping paper suitable for occasions both holy or profane, check. He would grab the roll and run off with it to his room. LOL. About 5 minutes later, I'd hear the pitter-patter of little feet running down the hall to wherever I was in the house. Daddy, he'd say to me, "Do we have any tape?" After searching through the shoeboxes of office supplies, he runs off back to his room, and I continue going about my day. Sometime later, he'd reappear. Inevitably, in this situation, he'd be carrying a crudely wrapped gift. He was 6. Typically, the paper is half shredded, the result of the not-so-sharp scissors we typically let little kids use, and the often odd shape of the item he had chosen to wrap. Approximately 25 feet of Scotch or masking tape would be wrapped around the paper and its obscured object, and he would set it down triumphantly. "Here's your gift," he would say. Oh, that glee in his voice as he delivered the gift of the unknown to me, knowing that I will never guess that in the paper towel tube he has wrapped, there is found within 5 marbles, a Hot Wheels car, a green crayon, and an old toothbrush. Once I had unwrapped the gift, whatever it was, his expectation was that I would rewrap the gift or gifts and return the favor. He would then unwrap the paper towel tube with its various sundry items within, and the cycle would continue apace. Oh, to be 6 years old again. You have to remember that during the pandemic, there were no birthday parties. There were no gifts. At the beginning of the pandemic, even Amazon packages were scary things. Was there a virus molecule attached to the package? I don't know. Let's spray it with bleach. We're going to wipe the whole box down if we were lucky enough to have some of those Clorox wipes. And once the package was open, let's wipe down whatever's inside of the box. And those drive-by birthday parties that you always saw on the news, they weren't exchanging gifts. That was scary. They drove by and said, "Happy birthday," and that's what you could do. So James found a way to replace this missing aspect of his life, the giving and receiving of gifts that kids participate. They participated in at both birthday parties and on holidays. Holidays were a little different because, we had already wiped down all those Amazon packages. But he created an event with meaning for him, giving absurd gifts back and forth. We were locked in the house. We didn't have anything else to do. So what do we do as Unitarian Universalists to create meaning in our lives? We can explore the spiritual aspects of the world through the 6 sources. If there's one that speaks to you in particular, maybe the 5th source that embraces science and humanism, set it aside for a moment and explore a different source. Try a different one and see how it feels. What does transcendentalism or Taoism or an earth-centered tradition feel like for you? Or maybe you're not a humanist, and exploring the world through science would be something new for you. I know I said earlier that the universe doesn't speak back to us. I might have lied a little. Because if you listen very, very carefully, you might hear a beautiful whale song you've never heard before. Or see the universe talking through a band of the Milky Way galaxy that you observe during a trip out to the darkest corner of the desert or the Sierras, or somewhere away from where the lights of the city are. Maybe you find meaning in art. A beautiful Gauguin painting that asks where we come from, or a Mary Oliver poem that finds beauty in a small piece of nature. But most important within all of this is that in a confusing universe, in this divided country, this world in which meaning can be hard to find, we celebrate life. We celebrate each of our lives. We find the inherent worth and dignity of all people. We celebrate the holy, whatever form that takes for you. We celebrate each other, all of us carrying that divine spark within us. We should celebrate this community and the larger community, UU community, and other communities. As UUs, we celebrate that through things like General Assembly that just happened. I don't know if any of you went or you were delegates on Zoom. That's a celebration of Unitarian Universalism for sure. Or maybe you get to spend time camping with UUs. I mentioned Camp de Benneville times. James has fond memories of going up there and making friends up there. And I leave you with some words, a short poem as we approach the end of this service. Close your eyes and return to a place which SpongeBob would say involves your imagination, in which the unknown is really just another version of what is possible. Here we are, lying on our backs, dreaming of a frozen lake, making angels in the snow that covers the ice. Our snow angels are now complete, but we are afraid to move, the ice beneath us having started to thaw while we slept. How thick is the ice? It is impossible to tell, and it is something out of our control. The morning sun is warming the ice, cracking noises rising in frequency, getting closer by the minute, and we know the end is near. We turn our heads, eyes locking as the ice gives way, and we fall into the unknown. What's under the ice? I don't know. When you search for meaning, Don't be afraid to step into the void, to explore some new truth, to find out what's under the metaphorical ice. Don't live in fear, saying what if to new things that come your way. And think about the villagers from the story earlier. The creature in the barn attic was simply someone they didn't understand. May it be so, Bishamaleh, and amen.